So I've been listening or looking at online the Nez Declassified podcast.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about a lot of shit that I didn't want to hear, but I've been hearing a lot about it.
And that's my point. People who listen to us are probably over the age of 20-something at least. So you know what the Nez Declassified School Survival Guide show was on Nickelodeon. And if you don't, look it up. But these three guys who play Cookie, and I forget Lindsay Shaw and Ned himself, made this podcast show because they basically couldn't get a TV show reboot. And they're going with a
whole iCarly thing, yeah.
Right. So they're kind of mad that iCarly got a show, but they didn't. But I'm slowly starting to kind of see why. Because because like this podcast is just debaucherous to me. It's so debaucherous. And it's not to the point. It's even to the point. I know that people are going to probably say, people who know me are going to be like, oh, it's just like the Christian side of you talking. No, I think everybody, regardless of which fence you're on, kind of listen to this and they go, you know what? That could have stayed in the box, man. Like, I don't need to hear about what you guys are doing.
God, they were going in the same direction, but it's one thing I heard in particular. I was like, yeah, no, this podcast is starting to get a little bit musty. Like,
and it's starting to
stink in here.
Yeah, and I used to have a crush on that main girl. Mm-hmm. I think I forget her name in the show. I think it's something with an M. I feel bad for forgetting it, but Lindsay Shaw is the name of the person. Mm-hmm. But she's just so... I hate saying it, but like, I'm not trying to judge her for anything. I know she went through a drug thing. Who didn't go through a drug thing as a child TV star?
Course, yeah.
And it's all messed up. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to judge her for that. But at the same time, it's like, you're just airing out everything. Like everything.
Yeah, because the clip that I saw, and I mean, filling the details if I'm missing anything, she was pretty much saying that, like, there was one time on set where she like was in the back giving Ned like top or something.
Yes. She was giving, and then she slept with most of the cast.
Oh, wow.
And they're just airing it out. Like, and the more we find out about her, the less like I'm interested in listening to the show. Because I feel like every episode, and don't quote me on it, I haven't listened to every single episode. And let me rephrase myself rather. Every highlight that they post on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that is always to do with sex.
Yeah, no, literally. That's all I've seen whenever I've been scrolling. Like, that's how I came across that. And at that point, that's past musty. It just smells like ass in here now. Like,
it's dirty. It's like,
oh, man.
It's messed up. Why? There's so many more topics to talk about besides sex. And I feel like maybe that's a disservice to the whole podcast in itself. I'm not trying to judge the whole thing. It's just that, hey, if you put out a highlight of your podcast and like maybe 90% of your podcast stuff is about sex, I'm going to just assume that you guys just airing out dirty laundry all the time.
That's what I'm thinking.
What you guys do.
Yeah, they're just going for the whole shock value because it's like,
oh, we're adults now. We just blow each other and that's what we do. And it's like, no, I get it. When you're young, you do a lot of dumb stuff, right? But is that really the substance here?
Yeah, because even the iCarly reboot didn't have that same type of energy. Like, I'm an adult now. It's time to go start fucking. It's like, for that to be what that podcast is about, that kind of makes you realize why you guys didn't get picked up for a reboot. I think everybody just knew like what was happening on stage. Like, you know what? Maybe it's best if we just leave that where it is.
We left that declassified. Like,
yeah. Very declassified.
But even the same thing with, there's another podcast with the girl that was Kim Possible. I forget her name too. She does another podcast too. They do like this blanket podcasting network thing, Podco. Mm-hmm. And they have like the Wizard of Waverly Place podcast, and they have another podcast with her, Susan Eva Stevens and Kim Possible. But and she also, it's the main chick from That's a Raven too. One of the main chicks too, the white girl. Forget her name. I don't know her name.
Is it? Oh, okay. I think it's what I'm seeing right here is Christy Carlson Romano.
Yeah, Romano. Yeah, there you go. Right, there you go. And she does it with the other white chick from That's a Raven.
Yeah. Right.
And they do it together. And even their podcast is all about, oh, would you have sex with them? Or I was getting drunk and I did this. And it's like, oh, this is just
just such low hanging fruit.
Yeah. It's just, I feel like that's just so, you know, like, is there more interesting things to talk about? I just feel bad. Like,
it just makes me think they don't have much else to say.
No,
like,
it's kind of
if you're all talking about the same thing and it's sex, and like that's just like the most common denominator, it just makes it you don't really have much to offer. Like,
no.
Like I don't need to hear about how for all my favorite TV shows, you know, chicks are just in the back getting fucking banged out, and now it's time to film this scene. So I didn't need that, and that's pretty much the overall consensus. Like when I saw it on Facebook and like Twitter and things like that, people were just like, I didn't need to hear this. No. Like you, like it's like you said, you could have kept this declassified. Yeah, you could have kept that
in the vault, like the Disney vault. I don't need to hear anything about that. And I think also too, there's like this weird air to the podcast where Lindsay is kind of still crushing on Ned a bit. And it's like a weirdness of like, yeah, remember that one time I gave you a blowjob? And he's like looking shocked. Like, he looks kind of shook. Yeah. Like, well, you sure you want to talk about that on the podcast? Are you really sure you want to talk about this today? And it's kind of weird. And everyone's like, oh, why don't you guys get back together? But the more I find out about her, the more sleazy this whole thing. It's just, you know, that's what I mean. It's just kind of, I'm taking a big old step backwards. Like I'm not even interested in it. I used to be really interested in listening to the podcast. Like at first I was like, oh, that's kind of wild. Isn't that kind of cool? And now it's like, is that really all you talk about?
When that's all that you talk about. It's like, all right, time to find out how Lindsay Shaw was doing something else. I don't know. It just gets to a point where, because don't get me wrong, people do like shit that's vapid, you know, and it's shock value and things like that. But you have to realize it does get to a point where it's like your target audience that you're talking to, you're talking about the show that they watched when they were kids.
Yes.
I don't like if there were cocaine orgies happening on the set of SpongeBob, bro, I don't want to know about that. Like, it's like, I feel like your viewership is falling off because you're just killing people's childhoods at this point. Like,
I don't care to know anything more about the what happened in the back. I don't care.
Yeah. You already know about Dan Schneider, and that's knowing enough.
Yeah, and we don't need to know anything more about that. Well, welcome to the Zoomcast podcast, the podcast bringing you news and discussion on all things, really, with just the right amount of ignorance. I'm just Vernon. Right
I'm Ron.
Nice seeing you guys. Nice coming in. Today, we have a special topic to talk about today. Today, in general, is the start of our Black History Month, like, extravaganza.
Yes. A cause that is very near and dear to our hearts, as we are both Black men.
Yeah, even though I don't sound like it. Whatever your dictation is, I bet people were like, I really did think about some of the times that we did the podcast before on our first like run.
Yeah,
how many people heard me say nigga and a bunch of other things and was just like, you know, this guy's like, he thinks he can say this to us. You know, I'm coming out my nerdy ass self like, hey, it's me.
Hey, nigga, like.
But I get it, you know, I hear you, you know, but hey, that's your prejudice talking, not me.
Right. Why does Black have to sound a certain way?
Hey, that's a you thing, not me.
But you did it, like.
But we are getting together, talking about films as it relates to our Black experience this month. Because again, like Ron said, this is something that is near and dear to us, and we like to discuss it. And I feel like what a more poignant and more poetic way to pivot from what we did with our Valentine's Day things, talking about 500 Days of Summer and
Eternal Sunshine
of the Spotless Mind. Thank you for that. And pivoting over into yet another romantic thing that the Black community deals with is interracial relationships.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone knew this, and I will say, and I'm not sure if I even talked about it on the podcast, but here I go. At least for me, and I know Ron has his own story, but I was a part of a interracial relationship. My previous relationship was an interracial relationship with a white woman. And I have, and periodically here in the podcast, I hope to share more of those experiences and struggles with you as the audience here. But that is something that I have a lot of experience on and a lot of struggles and hardships too. And as it being that we're so used to having a centerfold to kind of discuss these topics with, we decided on a film to encompass this entire experience. And what better film to have it displayed for Black History Month, but a Spike Lee film, Jungle Fever.
Jungle Fever.
So, Ron,
Yes.
before I start, let's talk about the streaming incident.
The streaming incident?
Yes. How?
Okay, so pretty much to start things off, you really can't find this movie anywhere. It's on YouTube. That's where I was able to find it. But as far as like a legitimate streaming service is going to show you like an original cut of the movie, it doesn't exist. Because while researching this topic, the only place that had this movie was Sling. You know, we get the Sling app, we start the movie up, and literally within a couple of hours, right?
Yes.
A couple of hours, same day, because we looked for it and it just wasn't there. See, but I should have known something was up, because even when I searched the movie when I first got the app, I looked up Jungle Fever knowing it was on there. It said the movie wasn't there. I was only able to watch it because it was like in your continue watching history.
Yes.
So I think by the time that I was looking it up, it was already shadow banned, and I only got to watch it for a minute because it was already to continue watching. But that was the craziest thing in the world. Like, I've never seen a movie get taken off a streaming service literally as I'm trying to watch it. That was insanity.
I was messaging Ron when this happened, and this incident happened here, and I thought that the Matrix got us, man. I really thought I was in the Matrix. I thought that they missed something and they scrubbed it out. Like the movie just doesn't exist. I was like really freaking out. But literally, as I'm beginning to watch this film, shadow ban, like Ron said, everything's gone, dismantled. There is no way to stream this movie. There's no way to go about it. I think it's on YouTube, right?
Yeah, it's on YouTube, but the one that I saw, it's on YouTube, but it's like reversed and the audio is a bit weird just to get around the copyright. But that's the only place I was able to find this movie.
So I did find some copies, of course, on Amazon. You can buy it there, but who wants to spend like $20 on a movie that you probably don't care to own? But it's a good film. Spoil it, like as far as like our thoughts, I like to think it's.
I think it was a great film.
But yeah, that's. We really I think they figured out that we were about to do something for the podcast, and they found out like, oh shoot, we got to pull that. We can't have them have it.
I feel like it's that, and they're also like, wait a second, we have a movie called Jungle Fever on our streaming service during Black History Month. We probably should do something about this.
Gotta go.
Watch this movie come back on the streaming service on March 1st. Like,
I probably will.
Oh, we lost it. Here you go. We found it.
Had to get rid of that, put Queen and Slim in.
Man, it's like all the companies when they'll have like the rainbow flags and everything for Pride Month, and then the second that's over, they go right back to what they were doing.
It reminds me of that meme of like, what was it, the day after Black History Month, just Frieza, hello monkeys.
See, where I thought you were going was the one meme that I saw where it was like companies like the day after Pride Month, and it was Mr. Chang from The Hangover. When he woke up in the back of that car, he was just like, so long, gay boy. That's really how it would be though. It's like these companies and these corporations, like they'll say, oh, Black Lives Matter, you know, Pride, this, that, and third. Man, the second y'all month is up, you better start trying to find somewhere else to work.
It's the shortest month of the year. It's the best we got. And it's off the back of Martin Luther King Day. So really, that's all we get.
It's the shortest month of the year, but it's the blackest month of the year.
That's how it goes.
Man.
But we're getting into the film actually now.
Yes.
Do you suggest everyone see it before they listen? It would be great. Enriches your experience.
Highly recommended. This is an amazing movie.
Because I want to start out with something that's also not really related to the film, but I have this marked in here to talk about. Man. That Stevie Wonder soundtrack?
Man, I have a whole note about when a Stevie Wonder song played during the movie and the significance of it. No, Spike Lee was in his bag when he made this soundtrack.
Man, this is a great soundtrack. And I've heard of like, you know, the Jungle Fever song, like, you know, she's got jungle fever. I got jungle fever.
This ain't my first time hearing it.
Yeah, I heard of it before. I can't remember where I heard it before, but you know, seeing that I'm a late 90s kid, I'm technically a Gen Zer, but I was the only child. So a lot of people who I grew up around were older than me. So I knew things that probably I shouldn't have known as I was younger, but I found out anyway. This being probably one of them. I've heard it before. I can't really put my finger on where,
Right.
But this is a great soundtrack. I put it on my Spotify list here, and I have some tracks in there are really cool. But yeah, Stevie Wonder did the entire soundtrack to this film. Man. As far as like, the bops that are in there. It is so interesting. It makes me forget how, or I wouldn't have known at the time. This is in the 80s, but this was a big, Spike Lee was and it still is, a big, it was a draw for the Black community as far as like a monumental moment for like a big studio to produce and distribute his film out to the masses like this. Almost like a Tyler Perry type of celebration. I was talking to my mom about this, and that's kind of like how it used to be. This big celebration. So it was interesting to listen to this big bombastic, almost tongue-in-cheek song for the serious movie. Because that's like the most levity you're gonna get before it like starts.
Dead ass the most. Like this movie even starts odd. Like
it does.
Yeah. So you want to get right into it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, for me, my notes in the beginning, because the movie opens with Wesley Snipes absolutely just banging out his wife.
Yeah.
I mean, she's hitting high notes and everything. You figure, okay, yeah, good, that's cool. I mean,
right.
Sex. The camera then pans to the next room where the daughter can hear everything. And what really stuck out to me about that scene was she's laughing when she hears it. Because to her, she hears it all the time. Her parents have sex, her mom gets loud. It's a normal occurrence. And me personally, that really resonated with me because just in my own personal life, my father was and is a very sexual person. So I feel like just growing up, a lot of things, a lot of instances that I saw as a kid that I really should not have been around. But like the little girl, I was like, oh, okay, that's just life. So to me, it really shows how when you grow up in certain odd situations or different things, it really becomes commonplace to you because why wouldn't it be normal? What other exposure do you have,
Right. And I was taking that and I hear you and like and what I took it as too, and I think that's a poignant scene. And I have my note in here and I promise to like, it's circling back in, but there's a lot of religious overtones in this film that are put in here, and it's not a mistake. There is a character in this film later on that does mention this, but I think it relates to the scene very well. And it's a chapter of the Bible, and he does recite this. This is 1 Corinthians 7:2. It says, "To avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and every woman her own husband." And I think this is, marriage when it's done right, it's great. And when you let your wife satisfy you and you satisfy your wife, that's how we start this film off. And you see that they have a good family here, structure's there. And when I feel like there's a trickle down effect, honestly, when there's a good marriage and your children, you can understand and feel that. You see them in the morning, they have a loving relationship, they have a loving information or you can see it flourishing their family. She's having a discussion with her daughter about, hey, when mommy and daddy are there, we're loving on each other. We're making love, and that's how it goes. And she goes, okay. And she goes, hey, I kind of knew that was happening. This is how it goes, I guess. But I'm happy that mommy loves daddy. I'm all for her. Like, if that's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
That's how I understand it. If that's, if it's all healthy, but how would you know as a kid? But I guess in this type of context, I like to think that they have I think it's displaying a healthy, not only a family, but a Black family in itself.
And I do agree with that. I don't feel like a part of a healthy dynamic is hearing your mom hit high notes when making in the morning. But no, I completely get what you're saying because it was nothing that they had the conversation afterwards and they explained it to where it wasn't, just like, oh, well, we were just playing or wrestling,
Right.
They kept it honest with her.
Yeah.
So
and
that's
I appreciate
really good.
That and to get at is like, I appreciate that it's a healthy thing to see I like to think at least, it's a healthy thing to see your mother and your father love each other in a way. And not to say you're going to visually see them making love or hearing it, but even I don't know if I agree with that necessarily either, that you have to be so freaking loud about it.
Yeah, because it's like, and she's in the next room.
Right, that's kind of weird. But it is healthy to see your mother and your father love each other in a healthy way. Whatever. That's a good thing. And I feel like the movie's trying to illustrate that part in a way that's kind of touchy. But we see basically a healthy father taking his daughter to school, holding her hand
every day,
being present, something that I never had growing up at all in the Black family structure. Things that are healthy and good, and we see he's a well-to-do, very much a high-quality man. He works in architecture. Wesley Snipes is this pretty much an example of a very, at least visually speaking, or from the outset, healthy, high-quality Black man.
Yeah,
and a healthy, high-quality Black family structure that is almost ideal, like the Cosby family almost. He's gotten enough money, he's a provider, and he's got this healthy structure going on, and everyone's just in a very nice structured home. And I think I have some other notes here, but this is the trickle-down effect I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And I feel like to talk on the Black family structure, and I feel like what Spike Lee was trying to get at too, is that's how you want it to be. That's what we all would like. Yeah. Picture the American dream of having the family, doing the stuff, and we're all Black too, and we're a strong unit. And we don't see that often nowadays, or even back then, I can only imagine. And it starts to fall off.
Especially back then, yeah.
And sometimes I feel that, especially depending on who you talk to, it feels like we have to owe it back to the Black family to go back to this as, well put together men to be with another Black woman, to have that type of structure. And that's kind of like, I feel like he's trying to just illustrate this healthiness and this type of structure here before we get into basically the destruction or the holdup of what happens. But I think we'll go into that at some point later here when we get there. But that's how we start our film. Healthy, Black family, structured, well-to-do Black male, good wife, good kid. That's kind of where we start off, at least I like to think.
Yes, it's very idealistic. And that is one thing, not the idealistic part, but pretty much just the notion of this. That is one thing that's going to be a constant in this film, how Spike Lee really gets his ideas across. Like you were saying, this is his idea of a picturesque, of a model ideal family. But as you were saying later on when we get to it, the destruction, how it goes. So much of this movie, and you'll hear us say it a lot during the course of this podcast, so many conversations, so much of this movie, these conversations are still happening. These are things that are still wanted in the Black community. And we're talking about a movie that came out over 30 years ago. So I think that's pretty, and of course we'll get into it later on, but I think that's really the most poignant thing about this movie, is that so many of the topics and the things that Spike Lee talks about are still things that are being discussed till this day.
It is. And I feel too, I wanted to touch on is, since Wesley Snipes' character here in this film is such a high caliber Black male, and he's educated, he has this office job, he is very successful, he still has to deal with the struggles of being a Black man in America and the corporate world and not getting what he's owed, what he's due, and having to go through those struggles as well. And even though he has what could be perceived as the American dream, he still has to struggle in that. And a lot of people I have to deal with it in corporate America and some things. I'm not trying to say I'm whining, but there is a deal. I think it's got better, of course. I can't really speak to, I've said I've gone through very much lots of discrimination at my job at all. But I feel he has to still, and he does talk about in this film, he has to deal with that too. There's a lot of struggles that a Black man has to face in the corporate world necessarily, that you see in this film and also outside of it today.
No, of course. And if I may, I actually had a note about the corporate America thing, because moving on a bit further in the movie, while he's at his job, he gets a new secretary or assistant. This is Angie. And the whole thing with her that he dislikes about her is that she's white, because you come to find out when he's talking to his boss, he says, "Oh, I said I wanted a Black assistant. Why did I end up with a white one?" And pretty much the note that I have here is that he's constantly reminded of his station, because even when he complains about this, something that he feels is fair, because he felt like he had a really big hand in building the company, he should be able to get an assistant. Or like he pointed out again, hey, why am I the only Black person that works here? When he has these concerns and these feelings, they give him very corporate answers like, why should we hire based solely on race? That sounds like reverse racism to me. And saying things like was really popular at that time, Afro-American instead of African-American. So even though he is high up to be a Black man, even where he is, he's still constantly reminded that he is a black man.
Exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I wanted to make a note here that there's a sense of pride behind this whole thing, that he really wants to have this partnership, because he's putting in this work, and it's true that a lot of black work and a lot of black a lot of things that corporations take advantage of is off the backs of black art, black work in general. And we don't sometimes get what is owed to us for these types of things as well. But I also feel like there's a bit of selfishness in it as well, because later on he does quit the job due to his dissatisfaction of not being made partner at this architectural firm. And also too, and it leads into what the cusp of this film is all about.
Yes,
is since he is a higher quality man in general, higher quality black men in particular, they don't tend to choose within any type of particular race or things when it comes to relational experiences. And I feel like that's kind of having Angie as a secretary. I think he's wrong inherently for cheating on his wife, because we go.
Oh yeah.
But I think I wanted to touch on it before we get into this, is that because it pivots into this perfectly into the next topic here, or the next bullet point, is that I don't know many highly educated, highly high caliber people in general who stick to just their race for things in particular when it comes to dating. I've never really seen it, and I have an example here. When I went to Texas, on a business trip, basically. I was there for a month, and I went to get my hair cut by a woman over there, and she does a haircut business for just men only. So she cuts men's hair specifically. And she was very talented what she does. She has high reviews. She did everything herself, built her own business, very, educated black woman. And she didn't date within her race either. Like, we talked about interracial relationships and how that works and everything, and the struggles that a lot of the high caliber people have, and just in general, not just men or even just women, but just in a general sense, highly educated, go-getting business type of black men or women, they tend to have more options, just inherently more options than they would if they were like on the back end of like having less education, having less options that way.
No, I agree. I mean, I feel like that's really, especially black people, but I mean, just people in general, the more money and the more acumen you get, you have access to more things. But it's funny you say that, because I really can't think of many super highly successful black people that are dating within their own race. I mean, of course it exists,
Right.
Like, Samuel Jackson has his wife. What's going to take off the top of my head? Yeah, that's a thing. But but yeah, no, that really is something that I don't think it gets talked about a lot enough, because when you reach a certain level of fame, fortune, whatever it is, it's almost like you begin to exist outside of your race, Exactly.
And there is a disconnect when you can display value that supersedes your race, and people start to see green instead of black or white or whatever color you are. You can do whatever you want, really. But I also feel like there is when we're talking about interracial relationships, it is and we'll touch on this later too. There's a bit of a pain and a hurt behind it, but for other people, and we will get there. But to get back into the film itself and the roadmap we have here, but that's kind of like what I feel like is touching on, is that he is this high caliber black man who can make these type of decisions. He gets very much involved with Angie, and they have this talk, and it's the most slimiest thing in the world to me, because he's basically saying, "Hey, I've never cheated on my wife before." They're like flirting.
I hated that moment so much. I'm married. And I'm happily married. I've never cheated on my wife before. And isn't there a point where she literally goes to leave? He's, "Oh, no, come back. I'm still gonna cheat though."
That's kind of that's the slime ball stuff I was talking about, and that's regardless of race. That's just slimy. All right, it didn't matter. And to me, and to speak about the thesis that Spike Lee's trying to illustrate by his lens, I feel like this relationship was doomed to fail on a general basis, regardless of race. But I think it just being happened to have been a interracial relationship kind of paints it in a more negative light than more than needs to, because it's already a very disgusting thing to happen.
Yeah, because it's just a
regardless of
man
race.
needlessly breaking up his family. Yeah,
Exactly. And I feel like putting in that frame kind of puts it in a more, I don't know, kind of a subjective view of like, oh, it's even worse now because it's interracial, not because it's just that he's cheating on his wife. And it feels like, oh, even the people's reactions to him cheating.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If, I'm not sure if you had anything you wanted to talk about.
Oh, yeah, no. I was just going to say that the movie, like even the movie answers those questions pretty much in turn too, because of course there's the whole matter of his brother Gator, who is like the complete opposite in my opinion, but we'll get into him in a minute. The movie really does handle that, because one part in particular that I really liked is, of course, this is after, they've had sex and they've gone back to their people. Because if you didn't know, Spike Lee also plays a character in this movie, and he plays the character of Cyrus, who is Flip's best friend. And how it goes about is after he cheats, he's at a basketball court with Flip, and he's like, yeah, man, I cheated on my girl, da-da-da-da. But at the same time, Angie's with her white friends, Italian friends, telling them how she pretty much cheated on her boyfriend. And the funny thing about it is that pretty much both groups have the exact same reaction. Because when he first tells Cyrus, hey, I cheated, he said, oh, man, you cheated? That's terrible. Come on, man. Yeah, and she was white. And she was white? Like, and it's the exact same thing on Angie's end. Because they're like, oh, yeah, I'll see you two-timing. Okay, no problem. Oh, what a black guy.
And Angie's also in this weird relationship that's not really going anywhere, and it's kind of stagnant.
Her high school relationship, yeah.
Yeah, and they're off and on, or kind of in the gray zone a little bit. And yeah, like you said, Angie's talking to her friends, and Flip, who's Wesley Snipes' character, is talking to his friend about it. And everybody's freaking out about the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what Spike Lee was getting at, that, yeah, people cheat, but it becomes so much more politicky when you talk about races. And I'm not sure if you even notice this too in your own personal experience. But anytime that I talk about a girl that I'm talking to, or I talk to my mother or some person about it, not saying my immediate friends, but most of my family, it's like, oh, what race is he? She black? Everyone goes, oh, she black? She white? She what? What's she? What is she?
No, exactly. I've had the exact same experience. I think mine was like it was like a little bit reversed, because it's like I had actually, brought white girls over before, and I had, had relations with Caucasian women and things like that. So when I finally did start dating a black girl, everybody around me was like, wait, she's black? And so like, they were surprised, like, wow, you can do that, huh? Like,
because the same thing happened with me. Like I talked on the podcast about how I recently went on a date, and the woman was black, and I even had an experience where I told my neighbor across the way, I was talking to her about my experience. I already told you guys, if you guys want to listen to what happened with me with my date, listen to the second episode of the podcast right there on rss.com. And so I went to go ahead and talk to her about what I went through with the date. And I told everyone on the podcast, I told her too, that, hey, I wasn't just really comfortable with this whole thing. She goes, you must hate black women then. Wow. I said, that is so far from the point, man. That is so far. But that's kind of like, and my neighbor, she's black herself. So I feel like we're kind of touching on this here too. I don't want to skip too far, but that's like the issues here. It's like, it's always a race thing. It's not like is she hot? Is she, usually that's a normal
treat you
question.
nice? Like, yeah.
But everyone, at least in my immediate family, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it's is she black? She white? That's like the second question. It's always like, oh, I'm talking to somebody. Ooh, she black? Yeah. That's what I get.
Because I've had similar questions in my family, and I think they wouldn't really come to me and be like, oh, what are you? You're the black chick. That's great. But I do feel like there are certain people who are just a bit more comfortable now. Like if I were to bring her around, it's just a bit more comfortable than, everybody in this room is the same color except for that person,
Right. Angie's friends, getting back to the film really quick, Angie's friends are talking about how that's kind of like belittling her, or that's beneath her to date someone who's black, and how Flip cheating on his wife is bad, but it's even worse now because she's white.
Yeah.
And that's not, I feel like we're again like touching on like, that's like, this is missing the entirety of the point. And I feel like this movie starts to, it's the whole point with the name Jungle Fever, is getting into the idea that everything else is pushed away, it just becomes a race issue versus just I'm cheating on my wife, or I'm a scumbag for cheating on my wife, or I'm with a woman I'm supposed to be with in a general sense. It's a race thing now. It's this. It's a deeper issue now, and it's more ingrained into something when we're missing the whole point of everything else. Exactly. We're sacrificing the whole thing.
Because the whole point is just infidelity. But it's like, you slept with someone who was a different race. You know, it almost makes you feel like the people around them would have felt better about it if they had to cheat within their own race, which is insanity.
It is insanity. And that's the kind of the thesis I think he was going with. And I want to talk, and I think we're getting on it and touching on it right now. We're talking about temptation and the fetishization and the curiosity of interracial relationships here. And I get tired of the idea, and I feel like we're touching on the scene where Angie and Flip as friends, and even before then when they were flirting with each other, because it goes super fast. I feel like they're kind of missing. There is no like very lovey things going on between Angie and Flip, and there it's more of a curiosity and a lust situation. And I hate the idea of, oh, let's try this out. Like, it's like a flavor, and it's not just, oh, you're a person and that's just how I'm interested in you. It's more, it's like, no, I'm just interested in your color.
Yep, because what Snipes even says in the movie, you know, when he's talking to Cyrus, you know, I have been curious about Caucasian women. And he said something to the same effect when she's talking to her friends. So it's like you said, it's treated more of like a Baskin Robbins flavor of the month thing than actually, hey, here are two people who are compatible. And let's see if they work out. So here's two people who are of a different race. Let's see if they work out. Yeah.
And that's the sickening part. And I will play devil's advocate. Like, I've been attracted to women who were brown-skinned women, Arabic women, those type of things. But, you know, the culture in itself is ingrained to, so, and I get it, and I'm not trying to speak anything against it, but it's ingrained in a way that they do date within their own people, and that's how they build, and that's how it goes, and especially within the religion as well, with Islam. It is very much like this is how you go, no matter how curious you are or about other things outside of where you're at. But I get there is inherently a curiosity of what is out there as well. But we're not, as humans, we are individuals, and it's hard to be an individual. And also with the reality of being Black yourself. So every decision you make is based off of almost your skin color, not as you being an individual. But we can't lie and say that men or even women, I'm sure, have had that thought process like, dang, I kind of wonder what that would be like, or I kind of wonder what's going on there. But it is backwards thought, but that's kind of like how society is built because of the structures involved there too. So it's kind of like, yes, but, you know, type of thought process, I guess.
I mean, just on average, people usually date within their races, like regardless of the race. So it's one of those things where, especially depending on where you are in the culture, even today, you know, you can still bring people around, say, I mean, even what you're describing, like with Arabic people, like, I don't know if you know it, but there's a lot of Arabic people and cultures where they really wouldn't want their daughters to date or talk to Black men.
No, it is frowned upon immensely. And there's still other, I mean, it's even in our race and things, there's certain people even now today still frown upon this union. People are so stuck on race, and it's such a big deal for people. It's a hurdle that people need to, that is hard to get over. And I like here too, later in the film, and there's later scenes too that incorporates to this conversation, but a lot of people are expanding upon it. There's Angie's brothers and the community that Angie comes from. And I forget the exact name of the community, but it's Harlem versus I forget the other city. Yeah, but it's a predominantly white neighborhood that she comes from, and these people are Italian guys. And I was going to talk to you about it too. There is a clear difference between a white woman and a white Italian woman. Now that is different. White Italian people, or at least the depictions of it, like I watched Sopranos, and not to say that's a whole that encompasses the entirety community. Could be like racist in itself. Yeah, I know exactly what you guys are about. You know, like I.
And it's funny you say that because there's actually a couple Sopranos characters in this
movie. You know, Chris Moltisanti is in here. We have, I forget, the father's also part of the Sopranos
the father,
as well.
He had worked for Tony. I forget his name,
And, but I was just saying earlier, it'd be kind of terrible for me to say, yeah, like, I go to Pizzapopolis, I watch Sopranos, I know exactly what Italian people are all about. Like,
I'm well versed.
Boopity beep beep, boopity bop bop. No, that's messed up. But I'm just saying, like, that's it. But that. But that's messed up, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you can encompass all of this, but from what I've seen in media and a thing like and everything, Italian people, they tend to lean on identifying as white. At least what I've seen, as far as like, the media depictions, not saying everybody, but it tends to be a racist or prejudice towards dating outside your race. There's a scene in The Sopranos, if anyone's ever seen it, but there's the daughter of Tony Soprano, Meadow. She dates a black man, a black Jewish guy. And Tony just makes fun of the whole thing. He's so not with it, and it's a disgrace for the Italian culture, at least for them to meld, and that's a big issue. But that'd be like the least on my list to try to get with, because that's a problem. An Italian white woman, that's like insane, right? Like
you can't put the fried chicken with the pasta. You want.
I could see that being a struggle versus just like your average, I guess, quote unquote, whatever that would be, white woman. It's like a whole different type of culture entirely for Italian people.
Which is such a crazy thing, because I'd always seen it here and there, but especially seeing in this movie, it's just so crazy that even Italians are like, certain Italians were even like, oh, well, yeah, really don't want you to talk to those black guys. It's just crazy, because maybe it speaks to my own biases or my own ignorances. But I've always just seen Italian people. I mean, of course, it's Italian people, but I was like, okay, well, there are also white people.
Yes.
But I love that there's that divergence between, it's like, yes, they're white, but they're Italian.
Yeah, there's a culture.
It's a completely different type of racism.
Ingrained
It's crazy.
into their community. Like you were saying, like that's exactly it. And that's where some of that hatred comes from. But also there's a curiosity throughout the entire film from a lot of people in this community.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say.
And it is something that has persisted. And we talk about how this affected in slavery and a bunch of things in history in itself. But a lot of these guys who are Italian guys look at black women. They're still attracted to black women. They still but they keep it on the hush. They don't want to ever be seen with a black woman. They don't want to ever be, but they will have sex with a black woman. They will keep them on the side. They may even like try to fall in love on the side on this whole thing, but they never want to make it public.
Yep.
It's kind of insane that a community in itself can ingrain you to be miserable, to stick to something that you're not that interested in, or just as a person. And you have to be forced or shoved to be in a community with someone that you're not that interested in. Or
no, literally, yeah. And like I was going to make a note of that too, where on all sides, because you have the Italians that are and Angie's boyfriend's candy shop, wherever that is. They're always talking because there's one black dude that comes in that he's obviously sweet too, but he's still with Angie at this time, and you can tell that he likes her. And like, oh, you like that black woman? But on the other end of things, after not jump around too much, but after Flip's wife, I bet she does find out that he cheated. She kicks him out. Her and all of her girlfriends are having a round table, and their situation is pretty much the same thing, but just the woman's perspective, where it's like, oh, well, you gotta date within your race because nobody else wants to talk to you. Oh, well, girl, I date Chinese, Asian, white. Oh, well, I just date who treats me right. And it's funny because on all sides of this movie, everyone has a curiosity, but for one reason or another, everyone's going to stay in their lane. And I think that's what makes Wesley Snipes' character and Angie so important, because I do feel like the other people in the movie, while they do clown them and talk about them, I also feel like they look at them enviously, because at the end of the day, they're still pursuing something that we're just talking about.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And these guys are, it's insane to me in a general sense, just hopping out of the movie really quick, but let me hop back in actually. And you were mentioning Angie's boyfriend at this time, before she messes with Flip, he does work at this candy shop, and you mentioned the candy shop earlier. A lot of these guys are Italian guys. They're talking back and forth. And also on the flip side with Flip, he goes. His wife is like, you're having this round table conversation. Everyone's having this dialogue. Mm-hmm. Everyone in this film is having these back and forth conversations, curiosity, temptations, but they're holding themselves back for really thin, dumb reasons, about whatever that is, because it cares so much about what the community thinks of you. And there's so much shame behind it, which is really silly, but that's something that's just ingrained in the culture. And because of racism, there's this intrinsic thing that's built into society that says that you have to do this.
And even just my own experiences, that's a really common thing. I mean, for Black women especially, just like a lot of Black women that I've talked to, I've heard that before, the fascination of people wanting to talk to them just because they were Black. Yeah. You know, having that Black fantasy. You usually might be a white dude or whatever, but usually having that fantasy of wanting to talk to a Black woman. Again, not really seeing them as people, but hey, it'd be really cool to sleep with this person whose skin color is so vastly different from mine.
And I think it's wild in a general sense. Just it's a wild statement. And I was talking to my good buddies about this. It's wild to just say that you only date one type of person, like one kind of race. And it's not like a particular preference. Like it'd be different if you say, hey, I like a guy that's got, or likes this, or likes a particular thing. Because anybody can like a particular thing and not have a race attached to it. But to just say I date only this race, it's kind of cringe, man. I don't know how to feel about that.
Because it's like, I don't know if I would consider it to be racist. Because I've had these conversations before. I don't consider a preference to be racist. But like you said, when it's like that, when I only date this race or this type, it gets to a point where it's like, if you really think about it, that's kind of like almost, in my opinion, like lightly veiled racism when you think about it. It is.
And I feel that when you try to denounce and you try to run away from something just because it's a race, it could be a person that likes the same thing as you, or that's the surface level thing, but has the same values rather. We talked about this in our earlier podcast. Having shared values, you're attracted to them, like physically speaking. They're not like whatever's your preference. But the only thing that sets them back is that they're a different race than what you're used to dating is kind of weird to me.
It's weird.
You know, it's very weird.
It's like you said, it just devalues people at the end.
It does.
It just devalues people.
But that's kind of what I wanted to get on is like having this type of preference and seeing where it gets you. Like, you know, a lot of Black women, generally speaking, end up with Black men regardless. Like, you know, that ends up being the common denominator that you see with, you know, the census. You can look at everything and track the paperwork and everything. Everyone tends to end up with the same race anyway at the end of the day. But a lot of people get hung up on the outliers that happen. But I think it's an interesting thing, just as an aside before we get into another side of this film, is to talk really about like the numbers here. I was so interested. There is a thing called the delusion calculator. And there's a male delusion calculator and a female delusion calculator. And basically it's supposed to illustrate that, hey, put in all your preferences, put the whole thing in there and see what the result is in the U.S. Census, and it backs up everything about people in this particular thing. So you can do particular race, height, financial structure, whatever, or you can do the same thing with women, or, you know, put them in categories of whatever. So I put in for a Black man with no kids, not married, who makes $30K a year between the ages of 20 and 35. And there is a 3.3% likelihood that you will find a man in that particular bracket of what you're looking for. If you are a Black woman looking specifically for a Black man all the time, and that's all the thing you go for, and that's it. I feel like that, obviously, with the numbers here, that puts you in a box. It's a box that is so stupid. And I feel like there's so much more to life than to put yourself in that box. And there's nothing wrong with having a preference of preferring something. But when it's like that, you siphon off your numbers in a general thing. I feel like dating or finding the right person is a numbers game, really, at some point. It's not, I mean, you don't have to put so much math behind it, but there is a numbers game to this whole thing. There's not a lot of, I hate saying it as a Black man, but there's not a lot of high quality Black men out there that are in abundance that I see often in our community.
Yeah, I mean, no, exactly. I mean, high quality people are really in abundance anywhere.
That's true too.
But the thing is, because we were having a dialogue about this earlier, and I mean, I agree. Like when you stick to only one race, especially if you are, like, let's say you're a woman, a Black woman, and you specifically only stick to Black men, but you're a well-to-do Black woman. You know, you might have your own business. You might make like what, 70, 80K a year, whatever it is. It's like you said, for something like that, just to date up, if you want to just stay Black, your pool is so much smaller. And really, in so many words, not only does being, whether you're a man or a woman, not only does being of a higher status severely handicap your options, but especially when you stick to a race, it's like you said, then you get into percentages where it's like, shit, you'd be lucky to find someone. So
and it's better just to be open to new things and new possibilities, and keep yourself open this way. But I feel like a lot of the community in itself puts you in a bind, and there's a lot of struggles behind this, and that's kind of pivoting into the next like bullet point, which is I wanted to get into going into this film again, the pain and rejection of this whole thing. You were mentioning earlier about the round table with these women that are talking Flip's wife when they break up because she finds out about this affair. And she's talking with her girlfriends, and they're all going in a round group talking about what interracial relationships or dating means to them or how that goes. That's kind of, and some women in the conversation in this round table, you can see it on YouTube too, by the way. It's like a minute and a half, like really awesome clip about, and there's conversations that are still happening today. And there's women that are picked aside. You were mentioning one said, I go for whomever, what doesn't matter what type of race, I'm just going to go out there and try it out. And there's other people who really just want a quality black man. They're not going to resolve for anything less than a quality black man. And they have like a bit of like an anger of like, why would they go for anything else but me? Ain't I good enough? It's like a rejection. It feels like because someone has more options than you, it comes off like a rejection of your race or your identity, and it's not so much of an individual making a decision to date another individual.
No, absolutely. And if you guys are trying to find this, it's Jungle Fever clip 5 out of 10, The Art of No Theory. And it's like Vernon said, it's a really good dialogue, because at the end of the day, as far as it's concerned, I really have two things I want to say, and they're both about the wife. In this conversation, well, actually, no, I'm going to the previous conversation, because before they talked, Flip did come to her store with some flowers and he wanted to be with her again. They talk in the back of the department store, and she just opens up. She keeps it real. She's like, was I not light enough for you? And then you come to find out that he's always had a fascination with white women, and he literally only dated light skins. So he was already kind of halfway in that camp anyway. But I say all that to say, I love that by the end of the conversation with her girlfriends, she comes to the only answer that really matters, where she says, you know what? White, black, whatever it is, my man is gone.
And that's all that, and that's the cup of what should have mattered, is
exactly.
That he cheated. That nothing else really matters. It's that he cheated. And that should be the only thing that really matters, is that he cheated. Not so much about who he cheated with. But I get her hurt and her pain, because a lot of the stuff that she's dealing with is the being made fun of as a kid, the rejection she felt, the colorism that happens in the black community, being light skinned. Yep. I mean, we make jokes about light skinned dudes and stuff like that, and then people want to make fun of that, but really, it's kind of in itself kind of problematic about, I know it's in light fun. It's not always to hurt people, but there is a need to divide black people even further than we already are divided. And it is almost like a self-hate of, oh, she's a light-skinned girl, so I hate her, but she has a black experience too.
As black people, we're insanely colorist. It's crazy.
Right. And that's kind of the deal. And like, having a dark skinned woman and her feeling like she's the most rejected person in the world. And that's why she's so angry and mad, and she hates herself and she hates the other. But everyone's dealing with their blackness and their identity of blackness in a different type of way. And there's different levels of education, there's different levels of colorism, there's different levels of all these things. And if there's like an inherent rejection and pain when a black man chooses a person that is not a black woman, and some black women and even black men, just black people in general, take this as a massive rejection of themselves, because the world feels like they feel like the world rejected them. So they feel like, oh, at least I got my people here. You think you got your people, you're all together, because you should be together as a community of black people. But people also want to put you in that category and not look at you like you're talking about as an individual. It's hard to be an individual as a black person in general. It's hard to do that because we're viewed as a commodity of just one big formation. But there is a beauty behind that, but also it's frustrating because you can't really be your own type of person. And when the world rejects you, you tend to, there's an anger of rejection. That is a lot of anger and pain there, Because I would definitely say, especially just with black people in particular, so much of that is already due to like so much systemic racism and things like that. On average, the average black person doesn't feel, at that time, and of course some now, don't feel the best about themselves simply because of how we've been portrayed in the media and because of just how racist our country is. So you have, it's a double whammy.
Because there's already the feeling of not being good enough that's put into you by society. And then when you take somebody from your own race and they did outside of it, that's when the true rejection sets in. Because, society already views me a certain way. That's fine. But when someone in your community then dates someone else, which is well within their right, it's already so much has been put to the Black community for us to feel bad about ourselves. Like I said, when we did outside of our race, I feel like a lot of people, a lot of that anger and a lot of that vitriol really just comes from the fact that they already didn't feel good enough. So then when people did outside of the race, that's when they really don't feel good enough because, like, damn, my own people don't even want to fuck with me.
And that's and we see this later on in the film when Flip finally accepts the fact that his wife is not coming back, and Angie breaks it off with her boyfriend, and we see them sitting at a restaurant and the dirty looks that they get. And I felt that same type of vitriol when I was dating my ex at the time. I couldn't go places, I couldn't do things, and Black women did give me dirty looks. I'm being honest, and it felt there was It sucks to, and I'll never forget this, man. I'll never, ever forget this. The same ex, we dated back in high school at one point, and we were on and off for like a while. And when we did our first date when I was a kid, I never forgot. I went to Fairlane, and that was over there in Michigan. There's a mall over there called Fairlane Mall. And it's mostly at least it's still now is mostly, it's closer to Dearborn. It's more Arabic now than it had to Dearborn. We have the highest rate of Arabic Americans, but it is a mostly Black area. So at the time when I was walking with this white woman as a Black man on a date, and I'm just walking around, I had so many dirty looks.
I can imagine, man. Yeah.
So many people were judging me, and I felt so small. I'll never forget how small I felt and how I felt so judged and almost talked about. Disgust, almost like a disgust that I was just being an individual, enjoying who I wanted to be around, and I felt so bad. Like I felt guilty even trying to kiss her at the time when I was a kid. Like it felt so, it was so dirty to me. But it wasn't my fault. I was being myself, and I was just being who I wanted to be with. But I felt like a shame, like I failed the community in some type of way, when really it was no failure. It was just people's own perceptions and their own type of mentality that was the projections. Issue. Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to get on this too because I have an experience where when we later started to date again as adults, the next door neighbors to her, they're a Black family, and they saw me walking in and out and picking my girlfriend up, and of course they're a white family, so they see me with her. And later on, I found out that my ex's car got egged. They egged her car. She was nothing but nice to these kids, these Black women, these Black, the girls, they're Black girls. And she said hi to them and everything, nothing wrong or nasty. And she asked them, why did you do it? And they literally told her, because you're dating a Black man.
Wow. That's crazy that, you still have instances like that happen in the modern day.
Yes. And it's insane, painful. Dude. And it's hurtful because I'm a nerdy Black guy. I ain't going to hold that up. I mean, I ain't goofy, but I am nerdy. I have, I was always a nerdy Black man. I read comic books and all sorts of stuff. And I was always in a different type of frame. And I wasn't what you would conceive or perceive to be a stereotypical Black man. And I feel like that's also its own type of issues too. But with that being said, I was rejected a lot by other Black women for that reason, that I didn't fit a certain type of mold that they were looking for. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But I had that type of rejection too. And I had to search myself that maybe even I have to work on certain things about my pain and rejection from other Black women. But I feel like there's a mentality too where people tend to go where they're loved, right? Yeah. If you have more success within a certain type of group of people or a certain type of thought process or whatever you're loved, you stick with, right? I was more loved and appreciated or even sought after by more white women than I was with Black women. And to this day, even though I do not want to ever siphon it off or ever change the possibility, I have never dated a Black woman in my life. I never been at least romantically involved with a Black woman. I've been interested in Black women, but I've always had to, it was never worked out with like another woman of the same color as me. And I always wanted to have something like that, but it's not something I aim for. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't,
and that's what you should look at it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, but no, you're right. I mean, because that's the way you should look at it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot to be said about what is beautiful within our own community, you know, and a lot of that has to do with the things that you see when you grow up and things like that. Because really, just as a whole, like comic books and video games, of course, the things that we're into have always been seen as more of like a dorky or nerdy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And especially growing up Black, it was really ingrained in like, you have to work twice as hard. You have to do double everything because you're not only a man, but you're a Black man. So many things, at least in my own personal experience, you know, growing up playing video games, comics, shit like that, a lot of that shit honestly got me clowned. Like even my own family is always like here playing video games, watching anime and shit like that. So a lot of that stuff, even though it's just normal entertainment and everybody does it, so much of that stuff was frowned upon within the Black community because me personally, I feel like we ourselves a lot of times feel like we have to portray a certain image and uphold what it means to be Black, when in actuality, what does that really mean?
Exactly that. You're talking about, there's a comedy sketch with Key and Peele where they have to change how they talk to whatever group they're talking to. There's like, when they got the all Black friends, they gotta like, you know, do the weird, like, you know, hey nigga, blah, 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 blah. And they have their white friends like, oh, hey, what's up guys? And it's like, I felt those types of ways. I had to conduct myself in a certain type of way. And I was also told too, and I know we have the same experience because it's something that's ingrained to us as Black men, that we have to have this type of Black excellence.
Yeah.
You have to work twice as hard. You have to do this. You have to go farther. You can't just be good at something, you have to be great at it. You have to do it. And it has to be done in this type of way. And if you don't do it, you're going to fall through the cracks. And basically that's been it's like a fear-based mindset of you have to do it this way or you are not going to be successful in America.
Exactly.
And when you try to do these types of things and go your own way, and really the only options that you had was you'd be an athlete, sell drugs, or I don't know, be a lawyer or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It was so much ingrained to do these types of things this way because it felt like there was no other option for you.
Exactly.
And you're boxed in this type of corner. And we were talking about being a high caliber Black man. And then when you start getting to the mountain and you climb it up and you have that Black excellence, you start to realize, like we were saying, there's other options out here than what my family told me. I can go here, I can go there. But there's also, it feels like a rejection, like we were getting at, when you do choose outside of that. But it's also ingrained in us to get to the mountain, get high, get the education, especially Black women, get educated. And that's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Make as much money as you can, get that degree, have the nice home, have the stuff. But when you get that, you are in a high percentage of Black people in general or on your own bubble. So it's hard to find people, even friends or even other people that have that same type of mindset as you, because it's been ingrained in by your family to push up the mountain anyway. And when you do it, you're like, oh, there's only like 2% of us who are really here. Yeah.
Because that's one of those things where at least personally, I'm coming to this dialogue now as we're talking. I'm realizing that, you know, a lot of that you gotta work so hard, do this, that, and third. A lot of that is just trauma advice.
It is.
Because we're getting it from our previous generations of Black people where it was harder for them and they did have to do those things. So, of course, you know, life gets easier, things flow better, races get more used to being around each other as time progresses. But it's one of those things where I've never blamed the victims for still having that mindset. Because at the end of the day, even if the world changes, that doesn't change what you went through.
It doesn't change that pain. It doesn't,
because it still happens.
It still does.
So it's one of those things where I feel like within our own race, we're encouraged so much to reach for the stars and get to the top, because the generation before us and before them was told that, nigga, you're never going to see that.
Yep.
So like I said, so much of it is fear because they were made to be kept down. And if nothing else, they don't want us to feel that same way, you know? So much of it, so much of, you know, what we find to be attractive, or there's things that we go for, or the women that we talk to, or what's cool and what's not, even the colorist things. So much of how Black people interact with each other has to do with racism and segregation and things like that. It's crazy. Like, so much of our identity, especially, I mean, I'm just speaking in terms of America, so much of our identity is pain, suffering, forced labor. It's always funny to me when people say, oh, Black people, they're angry, they're thugs, or this, that, and third, and like they make like with this crazy group of people. But when you really think about it, Black people's history throughout almost all of America has just been nothing but pain. What was that one black city that they were actually trying to? Was that it was something with an R? Tulsa, yeah. And it was too good. Was it in Tulsa and then something else like in Roseville too?
Ooh, I forget, like man. I know about the Tulsa.
I don't know about that, but Tulsa for sure. Yeah, when black people were trying to make their own community, and then white people just came and sacked it. So it's one of those things where even when we try to do our own thing, like Flip with his bosses, we were always reminded of our station. So
and you're pushed down.
Yeah, exactly. To me, it's a sad but beautiful thing. It's sad because so much of our advice and our things come from trauma. But trauma, I mean, shit, diamonds are made under pressure.
It's true. So that's what I was getting at. Like, that's the reason why I feel like you see a lot of black men in interracial relationships. That's like the most free decision they can make. I feel like, right? It's a freeing thing to be able to make your own decision of who you want to be with in a general sense. And it should be a decision that you make that's not judged or whatever, but it's highly, highly scrutinized. And that's why I feel great tangent we went on, but what I was getting at is there's a scene here where Angie and Flip are they're in this restaurant. Queen Latifah's in this movie.
That was such a funny scene. Dude.
Yes. And she's purposely ignoring to take their order as a waitress because she's super mad that he brought a white girl into a black establishment and they're sitting down just trying to eat.
Literally. He's I've been doing it for 30 minutes. I'm like, I would have left. But that 30-minute wait time is crazy. Like,
but I felt that. And I told you guys earlier about, the experience I had at the mall. But I felt that immensely in the thing that you can't go everywhere as an interracial couple. You can't do everything. There's people who are still stuck in their ways about their thoughts about you. And there's a certain mindset to carry into that type of relationship. And that's just like a good example that you see. And there's other examples in this film too. And I feel like that puts us into, there is another scene in here and it's so hurtful. But again, let's going back to the Stevie Wonder song. I'll be honest with you, dude. I don't know why. I can't explain to you, but there's a scene here where Angie comes back home and her father is beating her. And for some reason with the Stevie Wonder song and everything, I was like tearing up. I don't know why.
It's something about somebody being beat while there's like semi-happy music in the background that just fucks it up.
These 3 words. And she's getting the donkey.
No, she was getting the
beat out of her.
Beat out of her. To the point where her brothers had to come out and pull him off of her. Like, he was so mad. And even when she left, he's like, oh, my daughter is a N with a hard R lover. And it's like, man.
Yeah. she gets bombarded at the door and this whole community finds out about how Angie is with a black man with Flip. And, word spreads like wildfire in this tightly knit community that she's in of mostly white Italian people, I would assume. And one of the lines he says as he's beating Angie is so hurtful. And I will say it as a quote, and in the context of this film, I would rather you've been with a murderer or a pedophile than a nigger. That's hurtful.
That's so fucked up. I forgot about that line. Wow.
It's so painful and hurtful. And I don't know why it really hurt me, like, to hear such awfulness.
Yeah.
And to disregard your father. And really, I'll take everything aside about Flip. If he was a white man, that would have been a good catch. He's a good catch in general. What I meant to say is like in the context of her father and what he values. He is a high caliber black man who's very educated, who's well off and financially sound. And you're stuck on the race of this man for your daughter. And granted, they shouldn't be with him. She shouldn't be with him anyway because he's a married man. That's a whole other issue. But that's the part that, again, we're getting at, that he's stuck on.
It really just proves the point of it's a harsher version of what happened when Wesley Snipes and Angie told their friends about it. It was, you did this thing. Oh, but this person was black. So to me, I feel like this is really just like the extreme version of that. Like he said, I'd rather be with a rapist or a pedophile than a black man. Like that's crazy. And like I was saying, it just speaks to pretty much the overall message of the movie where. And not the overall message, but one of the core themes of the movie that we were talking about earlier is that even when you do dirt, depending on the race you do it with, it makes it so much worse.
It does. And what happens later is Angie's kicked out of the house. She's kicked out entirely. Her friends help her get packed up and leave. and the whole community's outside looking at everything, and it's like she's being judged, ostracized, kicked out, and totally forgotten about by this community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild. It's a wild thing to hear, to see this happen. And they're both Angie, and we leave off with both Angie and Flip being completely casted out by their respective communities and judged and thrown out. And it feels like it's them against the world in some type of way. But even that doesn't really last very long here, because you start to realize in this film, there's a bunch of scenes here too. They're play fighting and they get pulled over by the cops. And the cops start, interrogating him because he looks like he's, in a way, I don't think you should be play fighting like that anyway. They were play fighting a little rough, honestly. I think anybody who sees that, regardless of race, he was like damn near like, putting her on the car, like putting his fist up in the air and saying, I'm going to kill you.
I laughed so hard at that scene because they were doing that, like all this racist shit hasn't happened during the movie. Like legit, as they were play fighting, I just spoke to the TV. I was just like, now, why the fuck do I think this was a good idea?
Right, like that wasn't a good idea in general. I don't think I would ever put my girlfriend or whatever, my wife, or put
fucking hood of a car, like,
and say I'll kill you and play choke you. That would have any cop. It makes it worse though, because you're interracial. I get where they're going at with this, but it's a scary moment because I mean that's a whole other thing to talk about, and we can go all day about it, but maybe not even here today. But like, the black community, as it comes to the police, is already messed up, and I don't need to go into too deep about that. That's just like a common thing that you see, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it's even worse in the context of interracial relations and things like this, because, they don't normally see that happening. The cops over-assume that it's a black man trying to harass a white woman.
Yep. Yeah,
and white women have... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt you. I was just saying, like, yeah, like you were saying, like they had him up against the wall and had like the gun pressed against the side of his head, like they were ready to kill him.
Blast him.
Mm-hmm. And to the point where he was so scared that even when Angie's like, "Oh, he's my boyfriend, stop it, we're lovers," he's like, "Shut up, she doesn't know what she's talking about." Da, 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 da. And then once the cops leave, "Why would you say you were lovers? You could have got me killed." And to me, that was the moment where Flip really realized. I mean, he even said it himself. He sits against the wall. And he's like, "The hell am I even doing here?"
Yep.
And he begins to realize that at the end of the day, they just lived, like they lived in this fantasy. They wanted, their races not to matter and just there to be lust, not even love. But I think having that pretty much that sober reality of, again, being reminded of his station and what he is, he kind of just woke up of just like, what am I doing? I have a wife, I have a child.
And that should be the only thing that matters. But this, again, in the film, we talked about it over and over here. It's just like, but it's driving home another point of, you're saying, like, he's starting to sober up, but he's sobering up about, like, you're black, you should, but not so much about, I guess he does sober to the fact that, yes, I'm cheating on my wife, which should be the most important part we always talk about here. But that's just not, again, something that is
so the next scene where they're laying in bed, he's like, man, I got to go and see my daughter.
And I wanted to talk too, like, especially with this thing with racism and that happens with the cops. She's like going belligerent. She's doing this whole thing. And I feel like a lot of times especially when I was dating my ex at the time, you're with a person who doesn't understand your plight.
Yeah.
They don't understand your plight. They don't understand your struggle. They do not understand you being your minority understanding of what's going on here. And they have the luxury of not understanding what's going on there. They don't really have to understand what's going on there. But I think if they have any type of degree of wanting to be in a permanent relationship with you, they should take the time to understand at least the bare minimum of what they can understand.
Just out of respect.
Just out of respect of the experience. And I feel like that was kind of could have gotten killed too, her being so belligerent and things like this. But she's rightfully mad and angry, and they can get away with those types of things because they don't really have to think about being killed and how people kind of just walk past that whole thing. Like, oh, another black man killed. If I were to down the news today and someone gunned me down, like a white officer, it's the officer in general, hell, people would just walk past that. Like it's not a big deal.
Yep.
It's just everyday occurrence. Don't care about, how educated I was, what I accomplished, who I was, my friends, my family. I'm just a news report.
You're another statistic.
I'm another statistic. And I feel like people, or just white, or just other minorities in general, not to say other minorities don't deal with this at all, but especially within I can only speak in the black lens.
Yep.
That is the plight here. And as a white person, it's impossible for you to know, no matter how you are trying to be a ally, no matter how much time you try to do that, you will never quite get it. And it's good to just say, I don't get it, and just try your best to listen. That's the only thing you can do. But I've had a lot of conversations, and I think there's another scene in this movie before we get back to the tail end of this film, because he does have that moment of realization, Flip with Angie on the bed, talking about the relationship, talking about children, and talking about trying to build. It's sickening, because I had this conversation with my ex too, and we talked about having kids and things like this. We talked about building the story, this whole our world together.
Of course.
And that's a normal thing you talk about when you're dating for a few years. I was almost going to marry her for real too. So it's like I was really set on, for real, building this whole thing up. We had like a really interesting conversation about having an interracial child and the struggles behind that. And I wanted to take it very seriously. And there's a scene here where Angie does bring up about having children with Flip and how he's scared of having an interracial kid, and he's scared of what that reality is. And he says mixed kids just come out weird, he said, or they come out a different type of way, and it's hard for them to make sense of who they are.
Yeah, it was like mixed kids come out mixed up. Yeah.
Yes.
That's crazy. That's a bar, but like
mixed kids come out mixed up. Got this money up. Oh no, it's kind of.
Oh man, that's a crazy bar. Mixed kids come out mixed up.
But basically, I had this conversation with my ex, like, hey, like, there is a struggle here of you're gonna have a black kid on your hands. It's not a white kid, it's a black kid. Like, you have to understand that there's a different world out here when comes out of you is a black kid. You're white, and you have to realize the reality of this black kid, and it's you will never quite understand it.
This is changing your world now.
Exactly.
Completely.
And I think it's the closest that a white person can ever come to understanding the black struggle is when, or any type of minority struggle in general, is having a child and producing that child and and seeing it from their eyes, the experience that they experienced through. Because it's your beating heart. People say when they have children, it's like your heart rocking around.
Yeah.
That's under the skin and under the demise of a black experience, at least in this context of this film. And you have to see it from as a white person. And I had questions like a lot, like for my ex, like, hey, how would your dad feel having a black grandchild? How would your mom? I mean, her mother was down, I guess. She was always like showing photos and stuff of interracial kids, and I'd rather have someone on my side versus someone who's not on my side about the whole thing. Especially, you want your partner's parents to be with you. But, I was so curious about, like, what do they really think and feel? Like, what is that going to happen? And they have to carry themselves differently. It's a whole different mindset. There is an inherent mental lock when you date another person or another person of the same race as you. You don't have to explain it. They just get it. Yeah. And no one asks questions about it. But it made me feel like, what if I have a kid too that looks nothing like me? That's white all the way. I got a white, like, looking, or perceived white or passing white mixed kid. Yeah.
Because that happens too. For you when you're walking around with your child. Yeah.
Exactly. And like, what people think about me, they think I'm stealing the kid. They think I'm doing it. It's like a lot of thought processes and struggles that happens with these types of thought processes that I don't feel like people really think about when they're, and I don't think they should have to think about really.
Because this should be beautiful. It should be beautiful when people of two different races or two different cultures can meld, because at the end of the day, there's more knowledge that way. Because in my mind, when people of different races or different cultures come together and have a child, to me, that child is a hybrid. Like, that child has the experiences of one culture and one religion and a whole other. And to me, that just makes for just a more interesting human at the end of the day. Because that's someone who, just based off of their experiences, they're going to be more well-versed and well-traveled in a lot of things. And that's somebody who I feel like ultimately, when you take your children, even if they're the same race or whatever, when you take your children and you make them more worldly, you turn them into better functioning adults, in my opinion. So I think it should be beautiful when races, different cultures meld. Yeah,
it should be. But that's the struggles, and I had those same type of fears too, thinking about having an interracial kid. It's a scary thought, really. It is, because you will come to an idea. I think Dr. Umar talks about this, and I hate that nigga. I love some of the things he says. Yeah. I know, speaking of racism, me, No. But in all seriousness, though, this dude, he does talk about things like he's so against interracial relationships. He's so against these types of thought processes. And he says this thing, and I think about it, and I hate saying that I do. He says, why would you want to be with a person and reproduce with a person who enslaved your ancestors or who did this thing to you? And it made me go, okay, I get it and I hear you, but it's not... I want to think it's not that deep, but in some ways it's like it kind of is.
In my mind, it's not just because I wasn't a slave and that person wasn't a slave master. Exactly. So yes, that race may have enslaved my race, but me dating this white woman, that doesn't have shit to do with either of us. I was never in chains, like, and she never with me. So I get the notion, but it's like, damn, if you're going all the way back to slavery to justify not doing some shit now, at that point, in my mind, at that point, you're grasping at straws. Because there's way too many current examples. So this movie is more of a current example than slavery or why you shouldn't have interracial relationships. So for you to reach back that far and you're tricked back to find something, in my mind, you're grasping at straws.
And I get he says this too. He says you're diluting the black skin. God, that's and it's kind of, if you were to flip the races over, that is very much racist because a lot of white people say the same thing.
Yeah, they said the same shit.
Yeah, so it's like it's inherent racism here.
Bro, one of the Aryan master race, and you're talking about diluting black people. It's almost in the same camp, Doc.
And and the last thing I wanted to say before, and this is kind of like getting near the end of the film here.
Yes.
Angie's boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, her white ex-boyfriend at this time, he falls head over heels with a black woman.
White Italian ex-boyfriend.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And he falls head over heels. And I feel like this movie is showing the unhealthy version of an interracial relationship versus I like to think just a relationship, a person making a decision for themselves, because he's like in the subplot of him trying to make a choice for himself, the first choice he can make. That's just a him thing. And it's almost like we're seeing it, the argument from a person who just wants to be individual versus a person who just wants to do it for the community. And there is an argument for both sides of like, you can just, if you really want to build the black community, you want to build the black family, you can tell the strength of a nation by its family. You can tell the strength of a community by their families. We have to understand too, as black people, that we tend to be so separated and so against each other because our structure is so messed up. Mm-hmm. I grew up with a single mother. I didn't have a dad around. It's a stereotypical type of bring up for a black man. Mm-hmm. But if I wanted to, and I could, I guess, at some point, and maybe I will, maybe I'll just happen to have this to build it. But with a black woman, I would be able to build that community and have that strong basis and hope, have that strong marriage and those things we see in the beginning of this film. Mm-hmm. And I can incorporate and help the community. Or I could be an individual, which I want to be that individual, but I can't help but shake the fact that, yes, maybe dating someone outside my race isn't helping the overall community in itself, right? But do I owe it anything? Do we owe it to this community for this type of way? But I see this character making this individual decision to just be happy for himself and making that choice to date a black woman despite the struggles. He got jumped for dating a black woman. They were asking him, like, "Oh, you think you're better than us?" And you do. He got jumped on the way on a date to a black woman, and he was. I feel like this character is encompassing that he was willing to take the strides and to take the willingness to choose for himself what makes him happy. And that should just be it. And I feel like that's the healthiest depiction I've seen of just a relationship rather than just being an interracial one.
And I completely agree with you because I really liked his character in this movie because even before he, a little bit of subplot for him, even before he went to see the black woman, him and his dad have a very tumultuous relationship. The mother passed away however many years ago, but the dad still holds a candle for her. And he, in so many words, after the wife died, he wanted the son to replace him. He wanted to scrub his back, how many things just sell today. He pretty much wanted a wife and a son. Kind of like what people say now, how they say like some single moms will want husband sons.
Yeah, exactly.
The single dad wanted a wife son.
Yep.
And it was so dope because even before he went on the date, he finally had that outburst with his dad. And he's like, "I'm not going to scrub your back anymore. I'm not going to tell you how much I made, how much I sold or whatever, because God damn it, I'm not my mom and you want me to be my mother." And I genuinely feel like him and the girl that he was into, was not only a complete juxtaposition, but like you said, a healthy version of Wesley Snipes and Angie, because their entire relationship was just based off of lust and, hey, we shouldn't be doing it, but let's do it. But you kind of see, even subtly over the course of the movie, him even talking to this black woman, that was someone who just came in the store every so often. They would converse, say, hey, how are you doing? You want the usual? So I feel like with the Wesley Snipes and Angie thing, that was just lust, hey, let's see what we can do. But on the other end, these are two people who genuinely have feelings for each other. We just so happen to be different races.
And that should be how it should go. And there's a healthy depiction and a very unhealthy depiction. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that was a mistake that he added in this other side to it.
Yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel, yeah.
Right. It's this whole other flip side of how it should go. And I feel like that's kind of where this movie ends up leading is, and I feel like the grand thesis of this film, where he's trying to talk about as it pertains to interracial relationships, there is something to be said that, yes, it does deviate and take away from the black family. And I think he's trying to make it literal by it being a cheating relationship. And I don't think that was a mistake, because he could have just made this organic and could have just played it straight. This is a single guy with but I feel like he's trying to depict that, yes, it does take away and deviate from the structure of the black family. How can it not? Right. Mm-hmm. But we don't necessarily owe anything to the black family. We should look into doing those things. We should be a stronger community this way. But it starts with the family. It starts with this type of family structure. But at the same time, we are individuals to make our own decisions.
Because as a whole, you don't owe the black community or any community anything. But especially speaking for black people, especially when it's like you said, we're being heralded and we're supposed to uphold this image of a black family. What image of a black family?
Yeah.
So one of those things where, you don't owe your community shit anyways, but especially when it hasn't given you the best examples to look out for.
No.
At that point, I'm just investing in a bad property.
I get it. Like, I get that no one owes a community anything. We don't owe it nothing, right? But if you, like I was saying earlier, if you find it to be so important to invest into this whole thing intentionally, then go for it, right? Mm-hmm. There's a beauty. I think marriage is a beautiful thing. I think it's a great thing. I think building a family is a great thing. I think that's all a great thing. But I don't think that you have to be so intentional to try to do something to owe it to a community that in some ways hasn't really served us, right? Mm-hmm. But also it's difficult because no one's really taking the responsibility to serve back to it, right? Because a lot of people feel like I hate saying it, but there is an inherent rejection as a community as a whole as it pertains to itself. And a lot of people who get spit out, they don't want to go back in. And once they, like rappers, look at it, for example, they don't go back to their communities. So most of the time they go and they live in other places. They want nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. Right? Some people give back love to it. Some people want to go back and build it back. But it does take a bigger person to go into a place that spit them out and try to at least try to make it better, right? Mm-hmm. The same thing happens, at least in my case. I can speak for myself. I didn't have my dad. I feel the personal responsibility to be a better father and to be a more provider and a better person than my dad was. So I can build up and to have a healthiness to come back into my line of family. So the next time around, I'm a healthier fit and I may have not gotten it. And it's probably unfair when I look at my child that they're going to have a better dad. Hopefully, I'm a mess. I get it. I'm working on it. But I like to think that I'll be a better dad than I will be present, and not just to be just present. That's it. But to actually be an actual beacon of what I need to do to help out and to be that other, station there, especially for the black community, because we do need strong black fathers in our community. We do need this type of thing. But it doesn't mean that we inherently owe it to just being with a particular race or person. And I feel like that's the stick of what I wanted to say here is just there's that whole thing,
Because at the end of the day, for me, like I said, especially in terms of children, and we can put in this context, you don't wait to your community, but you're everything to your child. And I do believe, even with the black community, any community, in whatever capacity you're able to do it, you should leave it better than how you found it.
Yep.
Because like with me, we've had these conversations before many times. I'm the B side of it. My dad was around, but I didn't really have that emotional support from him. I didn't really have that understanding from him. So from my side of it, when I eventually start my own family, I not only want to provide like he did, but I also want to be that emotional. Like, I want my son or daughter, whatever, to feel like they can talk to me about anything up under the sun. 'Cause I never had that with my dad. I felt like I had to either not say anything or say things that he wanted me to say. So I understand what you're saying, because to me it is so important. I mean, not only my child, but anybody around me, because of how I grew up. Freedom is a very important thing to me. So I understand, because like you said, when you lack something as a child, especially when it's supposed to be provided to you by a parental figure, all that makes you think about is, man, when it's my turn on the chair, it's not going to go like this.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of like the whole cusp of this whole thing, is that you don't owe it, but maybe you should go in if you can, if it happens to be something that aligns with the path here. You know, it's a good thing. Be present, get in there, because we do need it, especially, you know, as it pertains to the Black community itself. We do need this. And this is something that is needed for us. And just in a general sense, like Ron was saying, it doesn't have to be just a Black or a white or whatever thing. It's just in a general sense to be there, to just be good, decent people.
Exactly.
Do what's right. We need more people to do that. But especially, I can say, in the context of this month and everything, the Black community itself, we need it. So I know there's a subplot here too that we haven't really touched on with Gator, who is the brother of Flip, who is a crack addict.
No. See, that's what's funny about Gator, because like I said, we're gonna be getting back to him later on. Now we're in the later on. Gator's brother, Flip's older brother, is the direct antithesis of him. Everything Flip is, he isn't. Flip has money, he doesn't. Flip isn't hooked on drugs, he is. Flip has a good head on his shoulders, he doesn't. So it's one of those things where I really like that aspect of the movie too, because you get to learn more about Flip's personal life. Outside of his brother, he has the mom who's always giving the brother money, doesn't even want to hear that's a crackhead, because, hey, that's your brother, don't talk about him like that. And then you have the father who is very rigid and stern and stuck in his ways. And to me, at least my own personal experience, I feel like that kind of speaks to the allegory of a Black family. Like, even when the father is around, usually, I don't want to say usually, but in a lot of cases, the father is a very stern parental figure, my way or the highway, but the parent is one that's nicer and easier on you and actually sees you as a person, you know? It's one of those things where it was such a crazy dichotomy, because you had the mom who was doing nothing but enabling the brother. Then you had the dad who just pretty much abandoned him. And you see that, and you can pretty much look at that and go, neither person here is right. It's not good to enable people who have problems, but it's also not good to completely turn them away, especially when they're your own flesh and blood, your own child. But it's one of those things where I really wanted to bring Gator up just because I have a personal experience with the scene in this movie. There's a part where Gator comes, I was going to say for a reason, but the reason is crack. Gator comes and just takes his mom's fucking TV and leaves, right? So she calls Wesley Snipes to go and get it back. Charlie Murphy's in this movie. Shout out to Charlie Murphy. He was the guy that Wesley Snipes went to get the information. But to make a long story short, Wesley Snipes' character, Flip, has to literally walk inside of a crack house to find his brother and find his TV. And to me, that is such a poignant thing about the Black community at that time, because I know a few people had to actually do that back in the day. They had to go into those dens and find their sisters or brothers or family members. And I genuinely can't imagine how soul-crushing that must have been to see someone who you love, they're not themselves anymore. You're coming where there's people getting sucked and fucked and doing pills and heroin and shit, and you got to try to get this person out of it, and they want to be there, you know? Like, I personally can't imagine what that must be like. And what I liked about the character of Gator is Gator speaks to, in my mind, he speaks to a lot of stereotypes that other races might have about Black people, especially at that time. He speaks to the Black man who doesn't do enough, you know, because in my mind, this movie needed a B-side, because you had Wesley Snipes who did everything right to a certain extent. You had his brother do everything wrong. But
not to cut you off, I'm going to say, you're saying these are two different sides. I like to think, I get where you're coming from. Wesley Snipes is the stereotypical, I like to think, successful black
that's
man.
a good take. So they're both stereotypes, though.
They're both kind of, because it is a stereotype. You see Tiger Woods, he becomes the most successful golfing guy ever, and and people go, of course he gets with a white girl, right?
You're right.
Of course. And you see a black man who's struggling and he's doing this, and it's like, oh, it's assumed that he's, this way, or you're bust down, broken down. So not to cut you off, but
No. I mean, it was a great interjection, because I mean, you're right. I just personally feel like for Gator's character, he also just represents, how's I going to word this? He also represents something that I feel like Flip, in my own head, a part of him is jealous of his brother, because at the end of the day, his brother might be a crackhead and got to do a little Gator dance to get money from his mom. But at the end of the day, he does have freedom. Yeah, I mean, his options aren't great, but he can be whatever he wants to. He can do all the things that his brother can't. I also think Gator, like I said earlier, just really speaks to what was really common at that time, and that's having the strung out family member, having the cousin or the auntie, or in this case, the sibling who's messed up on drugs, and you got to watch the mom and the parents go through that and try to fund it and get help. And it's a really messed up scene, because throughout the course of the movie, Gator, of course, he comes to the house, he dances for money. But the last time he's there, and when his mother finally puts the brakes on and says, I'm not paying you, he drops the facade. Somebody with a problem. And in his final moments before his dad does eventually come home and fucking kill him and shoot him, he breaks down. He's like, no, I smoked the TV. I'm on crack. I need drugs. Even to the point where he goes in her purse. Oh, all you got is 40 funky ass dollars. And to me, that scene is so real, because me personally, I've seen so many people, especially in the black community, deal with addiction, see families fall apart. And it's just terrible, because at that time, you also had the crack epidemic going on too. It was like he was a crackhead. So it's just one of those things where it's really messed up. But I'm glad Spike Lee put it in the movie, because there's something to be said about the one child who's doing everything right and the kid who's fucking up and gets pushed off to the side and treated like they don't exist, And the other thing that I wanted to say was the song that was playing when he was going through the crack den, just was it Living for the City or just the City?
Stevie Wonder song.
The Stevie Wonder song. I love it, because even that was poignant, because if you all didn't know, that song is about a guy who moves to the big city, but he still has to deal with all the troubles and problems that pretty much followed him from down south. And he has to deal with the troubles of, not having enough money, having kids to feed and things like that. So having a song about responsibility playing as he's walking through a crack house to find his brother, to me, that was amazing.
It's a great scene. Amazing. There's a lot of, and I don't think we give Spike Lee enough credit. There's a lot of interesting choices he makes in his filmmaking. Mm-hmm. The walking scenes are interesting. It's like a weird dolly shot where they're like almost drifting, but you hear like them walking, but they're just, it's like they're floating. Like
I know what you're talking about when you're talking Cyrus, right?
Yeah. Cyrus and Flip, they're talking, and it's also done with Angie and her ex or boyfriend at times too. But he makes a lot of interesting choices with music, filmography. I mean, he's an excellent filmmaker in his own right, regardless of the material that he wants to talk about or do things about. It's interesting. Yeah. And I wanted to touch on this too. Like, you were talking about the parental figures and how they were different and how they were different about how they handled with Gator. And that is played by the great Samuel L. Jackson. And that is it's funny, but it's not. Like the scene where he goes, I got to dance for you, daddy, is hilarious. And he's like,
man, dog, crack lord Mace Windu himself. Shit was crazy.
He shimmied his way to a gunshot.
He literally hit a Diddy and then got shot, bro. That was crazy. Like, bro did a whole Fortnite emote, then got capped. Like,
that's kind of like, and you're talking about how when you have the parental figure that does stick around in the black community, or like in a general sense, they are like an authoritarian, and I feel like it comes from a sense of pride and ego and a bunch of other things. It's not coming from a sense of actually being respected. It's a fear aspect.
It's a fear of not being respected.
Exactly. And I think there's an interesting scene here, too, that we do see Flip's father, and they call him the Reverend, and he's like supposed to be called
the great
Reverend.
Grand Pastor Reverend, all that.
Yeah. And I feel like he's also kind of showing a bit of the hypocrisy that comes into religion, or at least that type of Baptist faith when it comes to, and that's something that happens in the black community, too. There's a lot of hypocrisy that comes in as well. Because he got kicked out of his own congregation.
Yep, he did.
Because of his ego and his pride. I think we don't know why he got kicked out. I don't think the movie goes into the reason why he got kicked out. But Flip at the table when when he brings Angie over, that's his own type of racism in itself, talking about how he's looking down upon him. And it's also looking down upon him for, again, the wrong reasons. He's like, yeah, you have proclivities, and that's really bad that you don't look after your wife and your kid because you have all this stuff going on. But also, yeah, you're white. Yeah, everyone does it.
And the pivot was so crazy because he was just giving like biblical references, and then, like you said, just hard pivot into, but you're also white too, and that's really the main issue.
And
like,
talking about how the slave woman loved being white, or the slave master's wife loved just being white, and she loved doing this whole thing and putting her. It is a power dynamic that is insane. That you can read up on this type of thing about, white men and how they're in a station of power and how the white woman loved being white, but she was curious about black men and talking about how that could be a way to look at it. Because the Reverend does talk about this, but he's another character talking about this movie. I don't think it's a mistake that he brings up biblical references and stuff, but also in himself, he's kind of a hypocrite, right?
Right.
About certain things. I feel like Flip hits on the head about people making certain decisions that lead them in certain ways. And, Ye, who was without sin, cast the first stone, talking about how, talk all you want about my sins and what I've done wrong, but you yourself are not so hot yourself. And the judgmental aspect that comes in behind that. And I feel that, he carries himself in such, like I talked about, an authoritarian type of way. He's holier than thou. He's I don't know, kind of carries himself like he's righteous in his own righteousness.
God soldier type.
Right. And that's why he kills his own son. And I don't know, that's some moral ambiguity too, that maybe that was the best thing for him because he was going down that road. But also it's kind of wild to shoot your own son and be kind of okay with it. Like,
because did he shoot him, sit down, and then quote a Bible scripture? He
did. He totally did. And I wish I caught reference of what he. I think he said, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." He shoots him and he goes, "I will fear no evil." And I forget the exact. I feel like a fraud right now. I forget the exact.
Yeah, because it was something where he was like, "Oh, but where will I go now?" Or it was something like that.
and it's like a really shocking scene in this film, and it almost feels kind of almost out of place, like kind of randomly in this film.
It was crazy, yeah.
But there is something to be told about his biblical references that he puts in this film, and how really how right-leaning most black people are in general speaking, and how, I grew up in a Christian household, and I'm sure that most other black families also did too in some ways, regardless where you fall on the fence. I'm sure you went to church and things like this, and you do realize there is some hypocrisy and there is some type of over-righteousness and religious type of tendencies that you see that happen. So I feel like this character was to illustrate these types of things. And also, like you were mentioning, the man that does stay tends to be kind of garbage too. All right. Like he's not a great father in himself, and he had his own issues. And there's a lot of anger that Flip has to his dad as well. And he's sick of it, hearing his religious statements that's not backed by any type of merit from himself. It's one thing to be a believer, but it's another thing to walk it out, right? So you got to walk the walk and talk the talk of what you stand for. But at the same time, Gator, as a crackhead and as a character himself, was going down this dark road too, and he was being harassing his parents. I don't really see another conclusion besides jail or death, really.
Yeah, no, really.
But it's just really messed up that it had to be your dad that takes you out of the game. But at least I'm assuming, I don't know. I'm assuming that's their dad. I'm assuming so, or a father figure type or a stepdad type of person in this film. So that is interesting. It's a shocking thing to put in the middle of the film about interracial relationships. It almost has nothing to do with it, but it's almost his own thought thesis about this whole thing as well, as it pertains to this whole thing, because there is religious backbone to this film. I think that's purposeful. Like I said, that you see this often with this character. So that is very interesting, but overall, very dense podcast episode this week.
Very dense film, dense podcast, dense thoughts.
But I wanted to leave people with these thinking points here. I would love for people to take this film, take everything about it, rethink your preferences, and understand that maybe, just if you think about it, people are just people, right? Regardless of race, regardless where they come from, people are people. And maybe your preferences are holding you back, or maybe your own community is holding you back from a good chance of finding a person that's right for you, or making your own decisions in general sense. Read that comic book. Mm-hmm. Do what you want to do. Be nerdy. Speak like you got some dang on sense. You don't have to sound white. You don't have to sound black, or whatever you talk like is what you talk like. You don't have to be shaped or molded or have to be a certain way to be an individual in America here. But at the same time, I get that we are Black. We do have our experiences here, and you are who you are, listener, of whatever you stand on, whatever you are. Yeah. But I'm sure as a community, you have things that shaped or mold you in certain ways that you kind of maybe accepted to, or maybe you're not a fan of, but you shouldn't have to feel the need to be something that you don't identify with.
No, absolutely. I feel the same way. Be an individual. And I mean, if I leave able to quote, just something really simple. I mean, at the end of the day, stand for something or you'll fall for anything. Better to be your own person at the end of the day than like this movie, being who people wanted you to be or fall into those norms. At the end of the day, it's your life. You have to live for yourself and not others. So stand for something or you fall for anything.
And I think we all need to look back at our pain, look at our rejection, and heal from it as individuals, and before it turns into and festers into hatred, because that pain of rejection does lead to despicable acts and despicable things that you do that people of all races do to each other, and judgment from people just being happy. So I feel like that needs to stop and needs to be thought of, and maybe we, even myself, could look inward and see like maybe I have my own thought process I never really thought of that is unhealthy, and maybe I need to heal myself as well. But I think we all could learn from.
Yeah, I believe we all do. Yeah,
I believe for sure. And I think this is what I stick to as in my faith, and the thing that makes sense to me. And I feel like the thing that makes the most sense is the world's not going to agree on everything. And it never will. There will never truly be like world peace on earth ever. Yes, because everyone's going to disagree on whatever they want to disagree with. But I feel like when it comes to at least this topic as it stands with interracial relationships and, choosing the person you want to be with, it says what God has brought together, let no man separate. And I think this to mean to me that it doesn't matter with race, doesn't matter what's going on. If two people want to decide to be together, let no person separate that. Let no person get in the way of this whole thing. This union is whatever that is that you have chosen to be with. And if your values align, if you guys are good and healthy for each other and you guys treat each other correctly, what's the problem? Nothing wrong with it.
I completely agree.
Thanks for joining us with the Zoomcast podcast.
And if you want to find us anywhere, the Zoomcast podcast, we are on Google Play, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and our YouTube is coming soon. We're also on RSS. You can find us everywhere.
We are on most major podcasting networks here. You can listen to whatever flavors works best for you. We thank you so much for joining us today, and we are hoping to move into our next phase here. Our next couple episodes here, we'll be talking more about the Black community as a whole, talking more about issues and things that, relates to us. So I hope you join us next week for getting into another topic here. So thanks so much for joining us this week.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and join us next week and for this entire month for thought-provoking conversations and things that honestly I think people should be talking about.
Honestly. So we'll get there. And, next week, talk about Shaq shoes. I'm kidding.
Shaq attack. Look.
Talking about them dusty boys we wearing over there. No, I was kidding.
And the Heelys I never fucking got.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, thanks, Dad. You all take it easy. Thank you for listening.